Well, hey, good day to you. This is Todd. I am a regular dude walking in the Word. Hey, as we're going through Leviticus, these next two episodes contain material that I don't recommend the whole family sit down to listen to or watch together. So if you have children with you, it's probably a good time to watch this only as adults because I'm going to be bringing up things that you might not want to be discussing with them at this time in their life. You might be, but it's up to you. So this is just a warning to you for this episode and the episode tomorrow. It's best not for little ears. Today we're going to be going into Leviticus chapter 15. We're doing this, actually, it's a long chapter again, but we're doing it in two episodes. Today it's entitled The Flow of Fluids, okay? But in the middle of that, in verses 16 to 24, it's the flow of sexual fluids. And those two, the flow of fluids and the flow of sexual fluids, are treated differently, okay? So I wanted to separate those out, and so it's not just blanketed all into one thing. They're treated very different. So today we're talking about the flow of fluids, and this is taken today from Leviticus chapter 15, verses 1 through 15, and then we'll be going to verse 25 to 33, okay? As we talk about these fluids, some of the commentators that you read have expressed that the fluids that are talking about might be a discharge from sexually transmitted disease, okay, which the other nations around there were dealing with. And if you won't get sexually transmitted disease if you simply stay faithful to one partner, okay? There's a statistic that says 1 out of 3 people that are having sex outside of marriage, every one of those 3 people, it has a sexually transmitted disease. Okay, so some commentators are saying some of this that they're talking about here is the discharge from that sexually transmitted disease. In reality, you're going to have a bodily discharge with urine, with poop, and with blood, and it could be the pus from infection and stuff like that. So those 4 things are what the discharge is talking about, those things. So tomorrow we'll get into the sexual fluids. But today we're talking about those fluids, and it's treated very differently. So let's read here today. This is Leviticus chapter 15, 1 through 15, and then 25 to 33. So follow along with me. It says this: The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "Give the following instructions to the people of Israel. Any man who has a bodily discharge is ceremonially unclean. This defilement is caused by his discharge, whether the discharge continues or stops. In either case, the man is unclean. Any bed on which the man has the discharge lies, and anything on which he sits will be ceremonially unclean. So if you touch the man's bed, you must wash your clothes and bathe yourself in water, and you will be unclean until evening. If you sit where the man with the discharge sat, you must wash your clothes and bathe yourself in the water. Then you will remain unclean. With the discharge, you must wash your clothes and bathe yourself in water, and you will remain unclean until evening." Okay? I'm going to stop there for a moment. This discharge, it's just today, if someone has a discharge, let's say you're in a nursing facility, there's naturally going to be poop and pee and blood that has to be dealt with, and you need to clean it up. That's the standards today in a nursing facility. That stuff has to be cleaned up, and you do it carefully. You wear the gloves and put disinfectant down and so forth to do that. Well, God was saying basically the same type of thing, not disinfectant necessarily, but you had to be cleaning up after this happened, okay? You don't just, let the person sit around in that and so forth and have other people get infected with that stuff also. But it's just today it's like a courtesy thing and a cleanliness thing to not let other people sit in that stuff and all that. Okay. All right. If the man spits on you, you must wash your clothes and bathe yourself in the water, and you will remain unclean until evening. Any saddle, blanket on which the man rides will be ceremonially unclean. If you touch anything that was under the man, you will be unclean until evening. You must wash your clothes and bathe yourself in water, and you will remain unclean until evening. If the man touches you without first rinsing his hands, you must wash your clothes and bathe yourself in water, and you will remain unclean until evening. Any clay pot the man touches must be broken, and any wooden utensils he touches must be rinsed with water. When the man with the discharge is healed, he must count off 7 days for the period of purification. Then he must wash his clothes and bathe himself in fresh water, and he will be ceremonially clean. On the 8th day he must get 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, and come before the Lord at the entrance of the tabernacle, and give his offering to the priest. The priest will offer 1 bird for the sin offering, and through this process the priest will purify the man before the Lord for his discharge. Okay? So if that discharge is left, you've been healed of that, or it stopped, then you had to clean yourself all up, take a bath, clean all your clothes, and so forth. Then you were to give sacrifices. Okay. Tomorrow when we get into the sexual stuff, if there's sexual fluids involved, you need to clean up, you need to bathe and so forth. But there's no sacrifices involved, because sex is a gift of God, and it wasn't a sin. Okay, that's leading to that. And so the beauty of sex is there's no sacrifice involved. Okay, so that's how God separates that out there. Okay, with the fluids. So that covers the man. Okay, now we're going to skip down to verses 25 and read all the way to the end of the chapter here. If a woman has a flow of blood for many days that is unrelated to her menstrual period, or if the blood continues beyond the normal period, she is ceremonially unclean. As during her menstrual period, the woman will be unclean as long as the discharge continues. Any bed she lies on and an object she sits on during the time will be unclean, just as during the normal menstrual period. If any of you touch these things, you will be ceremonially unclean. You must wash your clothes and bathe yourselves in water, and you will remain unclean until evening. When the woman's bleeding stops, she must count off 7 days, then she will be ceremonially clean. On the 8th day, she must bring 2 turtle doves and 2 young pigeons, and present them to the priest at the entrance of the tabernacle. The priest will offer one for the sin offering and the other for the burnt offering. Through this process, the priest will purify her before the Lord for the ceremonial impurity caused by her bleeding. Okay? Same sacrifices the man had to do. They both had to do this sacrifice here. We continue on. This is how you will guard the people of Israel from the ceremonial uncleanliness. Otherwise, they would die, for their impurity would defile my tabernacle that stands among them. These are the instructions for dealing with anyone who has a bodily discharge. A man who is unclean because of emission of semen, or a woman during her menstrual period. It applies to any man or woman who has a bodily discharge, and to a man who has sexually intercourse with a woman who is ceremonially unclean. Okay, so we talked about these fluids are only one of 4 things. Like the pus or the fluid of infection, okay, blood, or poop or urine, okay. Those are the things. Now, when you had this, an issue with any of those continuing on, you were unclean, okay. And I'm not talking if you urinated, that didn't make you unclean until the evening, but if you had a problem of it leaking out, okay. And so you were unclean. So that meant there was no going to the tabernacle or the temple for you. Okay, the temple was later. So you couldn't go to those places. So imagine the embarrassment. Your buddy says, hey, I'm going over to the tabernacle to give my sacrifice and worship God. He says, you want to go with me? And you go, no, I can't go with me. And he goes, well, why not? Why can't you go with me? And he's like, because I have a discharge and I'm ceremonially unclean. And then he's like, oh, well, just, wait till tonight and then clean up and you'll be good. But you have to go, no, this has been going on for quite a while. And I can't do that. Okay, so you would have that embarrassment. You would have that stigma that we don't think about here, but that stigma that you can't go into the tabernacle or the temple because of your uncleanliness. Okay, so you're not wearing a sign that says, hey, I'm unclean, I'm unclean. But everyone pretty much knows that you're unclean because you're not going to the temple here. So this all plays out later on with Jesus here in Mark 5, verses 25 through 34, and also Luke 8, 43 to 48. There's a woman that comes along, and she had a flow of blood. Okay, that was her ailment that she had. And she comes along, and it's frustrating for her because she can't go to the tabernacle or in the temple, and everyone knows it because, like, why aren't you going to the temple? Well, because I got this flow of blood. Okay, so she comes along and she sees Jesus, and she touches Jesus. Okay, and then Jesus says, "Hey, who touched me? I felt the power go out of me." And she was healed at that point. Okay. Now, potentially, she infected everyone in that crowd that she touched. Okay, including Jesus. But get this: did Jesus ever have any uncleanliness in him at all? No, just when he took our sins upon himself. And so you might argue, oh, she just touched him, and so that made Jesus unclean. No, because what happened is as soon as she touched Jesus, Jesus had healed her. So she was touching, or Jesus had touched a woman that was healed. Okay, because at that instant she was healed. So hopefully that makes sense. It's not too confusing. That Jesus was perfect and he wasn't unclean because this woman touched him or other people touched him. She was healed at that point. Okay, but that's also an illustration to show how when you were ceremonially unclean like that, how much of a stigma it was to everyone around you. Okay, like, oh, stay away from her, she's got that flow of blood. Okay, even though you didn't wear a t-shirt saying that, everyone knew. So anyway, I want to close with that. Join me tomorrow. It's another episode with Parental Advisory, and we're talking about the flow of sexual fluids tomorrow. Lord's blessing. I'll see you tomorrow.